what I have done in this is just a basic outline of how do you approach congenital heart disease, and we will take it up a little quickly. So a congenital heart disease, as you all know, is any abnormality in the cardio or the circulatory structure at birth, even if it is discovered much later. Simple, not very difficult. There are two kinds of defects that we say. The causative factor is the prenatal development of the defect, and it gets modified after birth because of hemodynamic changes or the flow changes that appear after birth. So far, so good? Yeah. So there are four different kinds of congenital heart diseases as we describe them in the spectrum. The disease could be with the myocardium, or it could be a myocardial disease. It could be a valvular disease, that means the defect is in the valve. Vascular disease, in which the defect is in the vessels, and it could be a shunt, in which there is a flow defect. So simple: myocardial disease, valvular disease, vascular disease, and a shunt. In the myocardial diseases, we could have hypoplastic syndromes. That means the myocardium has failed to develop and there is hypoplasia of the myocardium. In the valvular disease, what we have is a stenotic valve or a regurgitant valve, or there are deformed valves in some way. So there will be regurgitation or stenosis, one or the other. In the vascular diseases, there is an abnormal pathway, or there are dilated and stenosed vessels. Like there might be a coarctation of aorta, or there might be an abnormal pathway which might be existing. Now, the shunts are intra-arterial, interatrial, that could be left to a right shunt that we just discussed, the ASD or a VSD, or it could be an aortic, just like a PDA. Only some of these situations or some of these congenital diseases, individuals will survive to adulthood. Others would die in infancy or in early childhood. Myocardial diseases with hypoplastic myocardium are generally not compatible with life and they would die early. The valvular diseases could be the aortic stenosis, congenital pulmonary stenosis. There could be a bicuspid aortic valve, an Epstein's anomaly, or most commonly what you will encounter would be a tetralogy of Fallot, which has got multiple defects. The vascular diseases could be transposition of great arteries. There could be truncus arteriosus. There would be coarctation of aorta, and there could be aortic root dilatation. So again, the disease or the problem is with the vasculature. The shunts, there are the ASD, VSD, and PDA, which is the part of the congenital heart diseases that we covered at this test point or today's lecture. Now, the common abnormalities are these. If I list them out in the sequence of commonality, or the most common one is the bicuspid aortic valve. Then we have the VSD, ASD, PDA, pulmonary stenosis, coarctation of aorta, and the others. Now, as you would have noticed, we can divide these into two parts. These two parts are the acyanotic heart diseases and the cyanotic heart diseases. So heart diseases which have cyanosis are the cyanotic diseases which are below the red line, and those which are acyanotic are above the red line. We also have Eisenmengerization or Eisenmenger syndrome. It's when the pulmonary hypertension occurs or there is a reversal of flow. Now there is pulmonary plethora or oligemia. I wanted to show in this slide the difference between the two. So the ASD is an interatrial septal defect. That means there is a defect between the left atrium and the right atrium, and there is an additional direction, or there is an additional passage for the blood to flow between the left atrium and the right atrium. So besides the normal flow between the left atrium and the left ventricle, there is a flow of blood which happens between the left atrium and the right atrium. Again, as we already discussed, the defects could be ostium secundum or ostium primum or sinus venosus types. So ostium secundum, that's ostium primum, and we have the sinus venosus defects. Ostium secundum, most common, 75%. Ostium primum, less common, about 20%, and sinus venosus, about 5%. We said before, ostium secundum presents with a right bundle branch block and a right 8-axis deviation. Ostium primum presents with a left axis deviation, and sinus venosus presents with a junctional rhythm because they have more problems in the origination of the rhythm. The PDA, there is a duct or there is a connection, anomalous connection between the aorta and the left pulmonary artery. It remains patent even after birth, and it leads to left to right shunt. There is increased pulmonary blood flow. Now, if we look at the broad categorization of congenital heart diseases, if you don't even listen to anything else in this lecture, and please concentrate on this particular slide, the major categorization is between ASD, VSD, and PDA. The coarctation bicuspid aortic valve, congenital AS or congenital PS. And we have the cyanotic heart diseases, which would be the transposition of great arteries, truncus arteriosus, tetralogy of Fallot, and Epstein's anomaly. So on the left are the acyanotic heart diseases, on the right are the cyanotic heart diseases. Again, nothing very difficult. These are the shunts in this corner. Then we have the vascular defects or the valvular defects here, and most of the cyanotic congenital heart diseases at this side. How do we approach most of these disorders? We have a symptom-based approach, and we have a general examination and a cardiovascular examination-based approach to arriving at a diagnosis of these conditions. Should I take a break here and ask you to respond to a few things? Sonal, would you like to add anything to this at this particular point of time? I just have covered in these last 10 minutes the classification of congenital heart disease.
Yeah, no,
Sonal,
that's
would
good.
you say?
No, nothing to add right now.
Okay, Ashna, are you here? I'm unmuting you. And if it gets successfully unmuted, I would like you to speak something and tell me if you are still with us in the classification of congenital heart disease. Because unless you understand the distinction between cyanotic and acyanotic heart disease, it becomes difficult to proceed further. But you can tell me what are the cyanotic heart diseases and what are the acyanotic heart diseases?
Yes, sir. These cyanotic heart diseases include ASD, VSD, PDA, and the valvular defects. And the cyanotic include the Epstein's anomaly and the Eisenmenger syndrome and the TGA.
Cool. So thank you. Ajat Shatru and Ajay Meena, if you are here, I would like to hear from you. Are you clear between there is a distinction between a cyanotic congenital heart disease and acyanotic congenital heart disease? Congenital heart diseases, two types, cyanotic and acyanotic. Are you here, Ajat Shatru?
Yes, sir. You were not there for some time, but I can hear you now.
Okay, I was not there for some time. Probably it broke, and I believe that even if it breaks, the recording of this session may still be available after the class gets over. and hopefully that will help resolve some of those issues. But you are clear in the distinction between, or you understand the fact that the congenital heart diseases could be just of two types, cyanotic and acyanotic. That's the first differentiating feature that will help us diagnose a congenital heart disease. Ajat Shatru?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So going on further from here, we will now be approaching congenital heart disease based on the examination findings that we would find while we are physically examining the patients, right? So most of the symptoms that we have are usually an associated skeletal defect, because when the congenital heart disease is happening, that means there is a mutation and there is a defect in the structure of the heart. At the same time, the skeleton is also developing, and there might be a defect in the skeletal development. So most congenital heart diseases could be associated with a skeletal defect also in the body. Number two, we would be looking for cyanosis. Number three, we would be looking for symptoms of heart failure. Four, we would be looking for pulmonary hypertension, and we would be looking for other symptoms. So not a rocket science. This slide is pretty simple. You have four symptoms that you are looking for when you are approaching a patient of congenital heart disease. You're looking for skeletal defects, you're looking for cyanosis, you're looking for heart failure, and you're looking for pulmonary hypertension. Now, what are the associated skeletal defects? This is something that you would have to learn or remember or keep referring to again and again. And mostly at the undergraduate level, they may or may not, they would probably not expect you to remember this. But if you do, you would definitely be looking at a higher grade or a more better performance in the exam if you are aware of this. So what this says is, if you are looking at a skeletal defect such as a dwarfism or a polydactyly, an absent radii or thumb defects, then the table shows which is the congenital heart disease that you would be expecting, and this top portion is most of them associated with a ASD. So if you are examining a patient of congenital heart disease and you find the patient is a dwarf, has polydactyly, more than the necessary number of fingers, if there is absent radii or there are thumb defects, then you start thinking of a congenital heart disease, and there would be a possibility of an ASD in this patient already, and it would be because of one of these syndromes. If you're examining a patient of congenital heart disease and you find there is syndactyly, there is midline hypoplasia, there are some mongoloid features, and there is mental retardation, then you should be alarmed or you should be looking for a patient of VSD. If now the reverse is also true, supposing you have made a diagnosis of ASD in a patient, then you should additionally look at these features. And when you are talking about the general physical examination, if you tell your examiner while presenting your case that the patient did not have dwarfism, did not have polydactyly, did not have absent radii, or did not have thumb defects, then the examiner would know that you have looked for these features, because you know that the congenital skeletal defects could be associated with an ASD, and you will get additional brownie points in your presentation, that you were aware that there are skeletal defects and you approach them and you were able to identify with the knowledge of having known this. With pulmonary stenosis, the features to look for are here, and the features to look for with PDA are here also. I'm not going to read them out to you because you can definitely read them out yourself. And anyway, even if I read them out to you, you would not remember at a later stage. But these two tables will help you identify what skeletal defects you should be looking for when examining a patient of congenital heart disease. Again, this is AS and AR and coarctation of aorta, what you should be looking at or looking for when you are presenting your case. So we looked for skeletal defects, and the second symptom that I want you to remember is cyanosis. So if you remember four, one was skeletal defects, two was cyanosis, third was heart failure, and four was pulmonary hypertension. These are the 4 symptoms that we are going to help approach a patient of congenital heart disease. So cyanosis is a marker of congenital heart disease if there is central cyanosis. It is associated with clubbing, which shows chronicity, and there is a relative comfort at rest, and the patient becomes breathless or fatigued on activity, unless obviously if the patient is in failure. So central cyanosis would not improve with oxygen and may worsen with a warm bath or activity that happens in patients with congenital heart disease. What is differential cyanosis? Again, this is a usual question you may be asked in the exam if you're doing well. And if this question is asked, then assume that you have been doing well. Differential cyanosis means there is different grade or degree of cyanosis in the upper or the lower limbs. If it is more in the lower limbs, it's called differential cyanosis. If it is more in the upper limbs, then it is called a reversed differential cyanosis. Now, if it's more in the lower limbs, it's seen in PDA with a reversal of flow, or if there is a pre-ductal coact with a patent ductus arteriosus. That means जहां पे duct originate होती है, उसके just पहले aorta का coarctation है और उसके बाद duct patent है. Then you will get more cyanosis in the lower limbs than in the upper limbs. So the consequences of cyanosis are usually clubbing, polycythemia. There would be cerebral complications such as stroke, and there would be growth retardation in individuals. Hypoxic spells are often commonly asked. They are usually seen in tetralogy of Fallot. There is a sudden and marked increase in the cyanosis and dyspnea. And if unchecked, the patient gets convulsions and relieved by squatting. So when the child squats, he gets relief from the cyanotic spells. I'm not going into the hypoxic spells mechanism here. And I will come on to the third feature. So we talked about skeletal defect. We talked about cyanosis. Excuse me. And we are going to talk about symptoms of heart failure. Symptoms of heart failure would be dyspnea, there would be edema, anasarca, and obviously the child would have poor feeding, may have failure to thrive. There would be repeated respiratory infections, excessive perspiration, pasina bahut aata hai. It's one usual complaint that while the child is breastfeeding, they get perspire and they get more sweating and they get tired and there is a diminished urine output. So those are the symptoms of heart failure. And you have symptoms of pulmonary hypertension in the form of dyspnea or hemoptysis. Hemoptysis may occur because there is excessive bronchial arterial circulation or because there is a rupture of bronchial collaterals because of this excessive circulation that is occurring. So we talked about 4 features, and these were cyanosis, skeletal defects, heart failure, and pulmonary hypertension features. The other symptoms that we have in association with these could be infective endocarditis, which is the first presentation in VSD, TOF, or PDA, maybe the first presentation, but it's rare with ASD. So that is the reason we don't give IE prophylaxis in ASD, but we do give a prophylaxis for VSD and a tetralogy of Fallot or for PDA. There could be chest pain, usually a feature of congenital aortic stenosis or mitral valve prolapse. There could be syncope, which is seen in a long QT syndrome or aortic regurgitation, or there could be an Epstein's anomaly. And often there is a sudden death, which could be seen in a long QT syndrome and a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which may be a part of the congenital heart disease spectrum, which we have. So this is as far as the symptom is concerned. And from here, we will go on to the examination. So again, I will stop here and I will take comments and questions. So Sonal, is there something that you want to say at this point of time? I know it's 9 already, but we are going to continue for about 20 to 25 or 30 minutes more at the most, so that we complete this talk on congenital heart disease. And since there are no clinics happening and there is nothing else scheduled, I will take the liberty to take on. Sonal.
No, I don't have much. I think it's just very important to recognize cyanotic versus acyanotic, because if you don't treat it early, then they usually just die. And eventually, the only time I think you would see cyanosis in adult population is once they have Eisenmenger's, because otherwise the other cyanotic heart diseases, if they are not repaired, they'll probably be dead by the time they come to you. So if you are seeing in an adult population, if you're seeing cyanotic heart disease, then think of Eisenmenger's over anything else. And Epstein's. Sometimes Epstein's comes very, very late. Do you guys know what Epstein's is? I know we've been talking about all these. Do you guys know what Epstein's is?
So again, I have not been able. So Abhik Sachdeva, I have unmuted you if you would like to say something. Adarsh, I have also unmuted you if you're still there. And Ajay, I have unmuted you.
I know, because we threw out all these terms. So it's completely normal for you not to know these terms. Nobody expects you to know these terms, but maybe just look them up. So Epstein's, we've been talking. So I think we all know about TOF, tetralogy of Fallot. I mean, we all read about TOF a lot. We all know about ASD, VSD, PDA. Aortic stenosis, all it means is the valve is tight, but instead, the aortic stenosis that we're talking about congenital is basically, instead of having three cusps, you have two cusps. So they fuse earlier and they become tighter earlier. So that is what AS meant. Pulmonary stenosis, as the name suggests, the pulmonary valve is tight. But we've talked about Epstein's. So all Epstein's means, because you might be asked about Epstein's in your, I think, entrance examinations. So all Epstein's means is that how the tricuspid valve basically is lower down. So your RV is squished. Okay, so instead of tricuspid and mitral sort of being at the same level or a little lower, the tricuspid is usually a little lower. So if this is your right atrium and this is your RV, the tricuspid valve, instead of being here, is much lower down. So what you have is a very tiny RV. So basically you're losing the RV function and your RA becomes much bigger. So that is, in simple terms, what Epstein's is. Yeah, so.
Yep, so I did not cover Epstein's because it was not a part of today's talk. But yes, unless you understand and know all of them, it becomes very difficult to really relate to most of the things.
And one more thing, I know we've all been talking about surgical correction of all these defects. A lot of times we have catheter-based correction of defects. I mean, when you guys go into medicine and you will see these patients, if you catch them early, you can actually send them for catheter-based corrections where you don't have to open up the chest, but you can do it like you would do a angiogram or a heart catheterization. And that way, if you catch them early, you can save them a big surgery and you can help, like especially ASDs. It's based on the kind, it's easy to just close them without opening the chest up. So I think for future, when you guys go into medicine and see these patients yourselves, I think it would be nice if you can catch them early and then send them for correction.
Cool. So Prakriti, I have unmuted you, and would you want to say something at this point of time? Are you okay with the symptom-based approach that we discussed so far? Prakriti Joshi? Okay, she's gone and we are talking to her computer. That's fine. Kulvinder Singh, are you here? Kunal, I have unmuted. Kunal,
am I audible?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
So we've learned about the four types of symptoms, and those were cyanosis, skeletal defects, and pulmonary hypertension, and some other symptoms, for example, infective endocarditis and heart failure.
Cool. So when we approach congenital heart diseases, these are the major four symptoms that we are looking for and approach them on the basis of these. Fair enough. So let's go ahead. I'm going to talk next about the pulse and what happens to the pulse. And most of the time, the pulse would be an important approach that you would take in identifying the heart disease or the congenital heart disease. The pulse could be irregularly irregular. It's not very difficult. When you feel the pulse, Irregular is a kind of pulse that everybody would be very easily able to identify. Whenever the pulse is irregular, the first thing that should come to your mind is an atrial fibrillation, and an AF may complicate a case of ASD. So if you're looking at a congenital heart disease, you know that the case is congenital heart disease and the patient has AF, then you should immediately stop thinking of an ASD. If you find that there is a collapsing pulse, there is a very dynamic, a hyperdynamic pulse, immediately you should be thinking of a patent ductus arteriosus or an aortic regurgitation. You know that collapsing pulse occurs in AR, it occurs in PDA. If you find that there is a radiofemoral delay, then you should start thinking of a coarctation of aorta. How do you find out if there is a radiofemoral delay? You palpate the radial artery and the femoral artery at the same time, and you find that every time the radial artery ka pulse comes pehle and femoral artery ka pulse is delayed for a longer time and comes later each time, that means that there is a radiofemoral delay. Normally also there is a delay, but it should not be appreciable to you. However, if it becomes appreciable, then you start thinking of a coarctation of aorta. So if we are talking about ASD, VSD, and PDA, if the pulse is irregular, it's atrial fibrillation, you are starting to think of an ASD. And if there is a collapsing pulse or a hyperdynamic pulse, then you start thinking of a PDA or an AR. I don't think this should be a very difficult thing to do, and this should be a very difficult problem in identifying each of these. You look for peripheral pulsations. Obviously, if there is a coarctation of aorta, नीचे blood पहुंच ही नहीं रहा है, इसीलिए वहां पे ज्यादा cyanosis हो रहा है, इसीलिए वहां पे pulsations weak हो रही हैं. So you will find that the lower limb pulsations are weak. The patient is having a differential cyanosis possibly, and then you are thinking of a coarctation of aorta. If the left upper limb pulsations are weak and the pulsations in the rest of the body are okay, then you start thinking of a supravalvular AS. But don't get complicated at this time. Don't remember this. Just forget it and forget the rare complications. But yes, lower limb pulsations are weak. Lower limb में ज़्यादा cyanosis है. Think of a coarctations. Look for pulsations over the back. Forget it. Don't worry. Then in the pulses, just remember three things. One, you are looking for irregular pulse. If the pulse is irregular, then you're looking for atrial fibrillation and ASD. If the pulse is hyperdynamic or collapsing, then you are looking for a PDA. And if the lower limb pulsations are weak, then you are looking for a coarctation of aorta. Besides these three features, forget everything else that I said or is there in the slides. Next, you check blood pressure, and blood pressure should be taken in all the four limbs. If you find that the blood pressure is equal in the four limbs and it's normal, fair enough, go ahead. If you find that the blood pressure is normally in the lower limb, blood pressure is more than the upper limb, and the difference is about 20 millimeters. However, if the blood pressure in the lower limb is more than the upper limbs, and this great magnitude is more than 20 millimeters of mercury in systolic blood pressure. So if the systolic blood pressure in the lower limb is at least 20 mm or more than the upper limb, then you should be thinking of aortic regurgitation. And so aortic regurgitation, when this happens, it is called the Hill sign. And on the contrary, if you find that the lower limb BP is less than the upper limb BP, that means पैर में BP कम मिल रहा है, upper limb में BP ज़्यादा मिल रहा है, immediately you should be thinking of a coarctation of aorta. That's all that you need to remember for blood pressure. That's what the blood pressure can help you determine. So putting pulse and blood pressure together, pulse में तीन चीजें याद रखनी है. You have to remember if the pulse is irregular. You have to remember if the pulse is hyperdynamic. You have to remember whether the pulse is equal in all the four limbs, या there is a delay in one of the limbs, या lower limb में weak है या नहीं है. BP में you have to take blood pressure in all the four limbs. You have to see whether lower limb का BP upper limb से बराबर है, बहुत कम है या बहुत ज़्यादा है. कम है तो coarctation, ज़्यादा है तो aortic regurgitation. Don't need to think of anything else beyond this. JVP, I was struggling, or I was contemplating whether I should take or not take. But let's look at a little bit about JVP. So this is a diagram which I have tried to show. In pulmonary stenosis or pulmonary hypertension, the blood flow from the heart to the pulmonary artery does not happen, as a result of which there is a backflow of blood, which gives rise to right atrial pressure, which increases, and there would be jugular venous pressure. So just look at the sequence of these events. Again, pulmonary stenosis or hypertension, there is backflow of blood which is occurring, there is increased in right atrial pressure, and JVP बढ़ जाता है. If there is tricuspid atresia, there is also then transmission of the pressure. You would find jugular venous pressure increases or JVP increases. If there is a left to right shunt, again, that means RA का pressure बढ़ रहा है. So RA का pressure बढ़ रहा है, so this will be transmitted back into the jugular vein and you will get a high JVP. If there is a left to right shunt in the ventricular septum or the VSD kinds of things, then again there would be back pressure changes, RA ka pressure badhega, and there would be increased JVP or JVP pulsations would be seen. That's probably all I want you to remember. In ASD, usually it is normal. If it is elevated, think of pulmonary hypertension. If JVP in VSD, again, it's normal in small to moderate VSDs. If it's elevated, think of a large VSD with the right ventricular failure. JVP again is normal in tetralogy of Fallot. And if there is a cyanosis plus raised JVP, think of things like tricuspid atresia or TGA or pulmonary stenosis. That's as far as the general examination is concerned. We talked about pulse, blood pressure, and JVP and cyanosis. So we've got 4 things in general examination which will help us approach a case of congenital heart disease. So we would have seen cyanosis, we would have seen pulse, we would have seen blood pressure, and we would have seen JVP. Based on these 4, let's see where we are and how we stand.
Sir, you are inaudible again.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so I think till he comes back, what questions do you guys have? I think you can type in the chat box and send it to organizers and panelists, and then I can see your questions. Feel free to type whatever questions you have, any terms that you were like, that were new, because a lot of them were new. No questions? Let's make use of the time we have, guys. Now that you guys are here, might as well ask some questions and make use of the time that you're spending.
Yes, Sonal.
Oh, you had disappeared. We couldn't even hear you or see you.
So where did you lose it?
Where you said these 4 things we have done, and then how do we like, after we covered everything and after the whole general examination was done.
Okay, so probably at the beginning of this slide.
Yes, before all of this came up, right there.
Yes. So let me take this up again because I would not want you to miss this part of it. So this is one of the most important slides of the entire presentation, and please follow me again. I will repeat everything. So we have the general physical examination, and as soon as you look at the patient, you would immediately be able to identify at least 2 things. क्या वो blue है या वो blue नहीं है? Is he cyanotic? Is he acyanotic? So that's a very easy distinction for you to make. Is he cyanotic? Is he acyanotic? Now, supposing the patient is acyanotic, measure the blood pressure in the lower limb. Now, if 3 ही चीजें हो सकती हैं, या तो BP कम होगा, या नॉर्मल होगा, या ज्यादा होगा. अगर लेग में, पैर में BP low है, now we took this earlier, and you find there is a differential cyanosis, यानी कि पैर में cyanosis ज्यादा है, the feet are appearing more blue, and the lower limb BP is low. Immediately you should be alerted to think of a coarctation of aorta. So far so good. Lower limb BP come hai, and there is a differential cyanosis, which is more cyanosis in the legs. You are starting to think of a coarctation of aorta. Now, supposing there is a high lower limb BP in an acyanotic congenital heart disease, there are only 2 possibilities. Either you are dealing with aortic regurgitation or you are dealing with a patent ductus arteriosus. वो दोनों के अंदर you have a collapsing pulse, you have a hyperdynamic circulation, and you have a higher lower limb blood pressure. Start looking for peripheral signs of aortic regurgitation, and then these are the 2 possibilities that are left in front of you. Supposing you have a normal lower limb blood pressure in a cyanotic or a acyanotic heart disease, and you are looking for JVP. Now, I know JVP is confusing for any undergraduate student, so I have kept this very simple at this point of time. You can easily identify if the patient is cyanosed or not cyanosed. You know the patient has central cyanosis, and you know that the patient has got a normal JVP. If these 3 features are matching, the patient is obviously cyanosed, which is a central cyanosis, and you don't find JVPs raised. So I'm not going into the details of A wave, C wave, V wave, or there is an X descent or Y descent, forget all that. But agar JVP raised nahi mil raha hai in a cyanotic patient, stop thinking of a tetralogy of Fallot as your diagnosis. I'm not going beyond this much for the purpose of identification of a general physical examination, and we will go on to inspection and palpation. Here is when I took a break and I brought in the rest of you. So at this point, is there something that you would like to add?
No, I mean, whatever questions they have about what we've discussed so far, but nothing much. I mean, it'll come with time.
Cool. So if you have any questions, raise your hand now and I will unmute you. I'm unmuting those who have raised their hands already. So there is Kiran Meena. I know I have unmuted you. Then there is Mitali. Mitali, I'm unmuting you now because I see your raised hand. Sharad Sa, I'm unmuting you. And Swati, I'm unmuting you. Swati Sharma. Mitali, you want to say something?
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
No, sir.
Yeah, Mitali first.
मैम क्वार्टिंग से साइनोसिस कैसे रिलीव होगा जब कोआक्टेशन पेशेंट्स में?
So that squatting and cyanosis is not for coact. It's actually only for people with TOF, tetralogy of Fallot. So the concept behind
Hello?
is when you squat. Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, you are audible. I think you are good. Go ahead.
Okay. So just squatting, it's not a general term. The squatting and relief of cyanosis is not general. It's only for patients with TOF that you typically see it. The concept behind is then you're sending blood back to the heart when you squat. Okay, you're contracting
Yep.
your calf muscle and you're sending blood back to the heart. And in turn, what you're doing is you're just the way the talk is, it's hard to explain this way, but what you're doing is basically, since you're sending more blood back, eventually you're sending more blood out of the heart and relieving cyanosis in patients with cough. It's not applicable to other cyanotic heart diseases. It's only for kids with cough. Early talk that too, not later in the disease. Like not if once they have become much worse, it won't do anything. So if you want, I can send you an article, link or something, but that's not a blanket term. It's only for patients with cough. You send more blood back. The way it works is you sort of separate the two areas and send more blood forward and you release cyanosis because you have more cardiac output to those.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, so I brought back to this slide. If it's on your screen for the answer to this question, I avoided this slide while making the presentation or while doing the presentation was because this is relating more to tetralogy of Fallot and really does not apply to everyone else. But fair enough. Squatting reduces the right to left shunt because it increases the systemic vascular resistance. And when you are squatting, your blood from the lower limbs is flowing back to the heart, and that reduces your cyanosis. But again, as Sonal said, in early tetralogy of Fallot, and may not even be applicable in late or advanced disease.
I think Mitali had a question.
Swati.
Swati.
Yeah, Mitali.
Yes,
Swati.
sir. Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. Sir, am I audible?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Ma'am, I had the question that why is it so that, as I said, that in aortic regurgitation, we get that lower limb pressure is more than the upper limb blood pressure?
So what is happening in aortic regurgitation is actually a lot of your blood. So what is aortic regurgitation? Normally during systole, a lot of blood goes back into the left ventricle, right? And eventually what you have is you have more than normal blood in the left ventricle, so your cardiac output increases. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So one second, I'm just thinking how to put it best. How to put it best, that why is there more lower limb blood pressure as compared to upper limb blood pressure in aortic regurg? Sir, do you have any diagram or anything?
I missed out. I was trying to reconnect my laptop, so I really missed out on what was the discussion. Can you repeat that?
All I've said so far now is that in aortic regurg, there's a lot of blood going back into the left ventricle during systole instead of it going forward. So you have a lot of, eventually what you do is you have a lot of cardiac output.
So what was the question initially? I'm missing on that.
Why is the lower limb blood pressure more than upper limb blood pressure in aortic regurg? The difference in
aortic. Okay, so it's because of the diastolic runoff and the dynamics of circulation in aortic regurgitation that there is more runoff which goes into the lower limbs as well. So there is increased volume of blood which is flowing to the lower limbs, and that's why you get a higher blood pressure in there. That's what I believe. So correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I just don't know if there is any other better way to explain it, other than the fact that it's just the physiology of how the diastolic blood pressure behaves in patients with aortic regurg. So there is a wide pulse pressure, and what happens is eventually the way the pulse. So it has everything to do with pulse dynamics. Okay, so when you have let's say you have a catheter and you have a catheter in the aorta, and then you have a catheter in the femoral artery, right? So which is, let's say, your central and your peripheral. It is just how pulse is transmitted. Mitali, was that you that asked the question?
No, ma'am. This is Swati Sharma.
Okay, so the way that it works, I mean, I don't have a easy way to explain it, but it's basically how when, like, let's say what you're saying is whatever is closer to the heart and then whatever is distal from the heart. So let's say for sake of argument, you have a model or you have a person, you put one catheter and you're measuring pulse or pulse in the aorta, and then you have one catheter which is in the femoral artery. It is just the way the vasculature behaves that pulse has different appearances in the central as compared to peripheral. So in aortic regurgitation, you have a lot of volume going back in the left ventricle as compared to as compared to normal when the valve is not leaking. And just the way the pulse gets transmitted to areas which are distal as compared to closer to the heart, that you see this difference. I think that would be the easiest way to explain it. It's if you search femoral versus femoral catheter versus aortic catheter, it'll give you the mechanism of how the resistance is in the arteries, which leads to a difference in the pulse in two areas. So that would be the easiest, I think. Sorry, I don't have a better explanation than
I
this.
agree. I agree. So thank you,
ma'am. Thank you,
Swati, for
sir.
asking a difficult question.
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked because that shows you were there and you were thinking. I know the class has gone on beyond the 8 to 9. I really don't know if people want to stay or want to leave. I have no problem. I mean, even if you leave or you have other engagements, please go ahead and continue. Those who are here, we will continue on till the end of whatever I was trying to do. Swati, you were saying something. No, Mitali was trying to say
No,
something.
sir.
Then we cut her out.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes,
Hello.
Mitali.
Sir, I had the same
Yes,
question as
Mitali.
that of Swati. I'm clear now.
No,
Yeah.
I'm glad you're clear, and I'm surprised you're clear. I'm actually
I'm so
surprised that
clear.
you're clear.
Let me see if I can pull up something and maybe share
Yes,
my
share with.
something. Yeah,
Cool.
to show the
You can
femoral.
put it in the handouts. There are handouts on the panel, and the handouts can go to all the participants in the class, and you could even put it in the handouts. Just drag it and put it in the handouts. It will be shared with everyone.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope we are good with what we have been talking so far. So we've done the symptoms. We have done the general examination. So in the symptoms, we talked about skeletal defects. We talked about heart failure. We talked about cyanosis. We talked about, no, in the symptoms, we talked about skeletal defects. We talked about heart failure. We talked about pulmonary hypertension. And in the examination, general examination, we talked about pulse, blood pressure, cyanosis, and JVP. So 4 things on examination, 4 things on symptoms. Now let's go on to the inspection and palpation and see how they will help us in approaching a case of congenital heart disease. Again, inspection and palpation, 4 things that you need to look at: the apical impulse, the parasternal lift or a parasternal heave, the left upper sternal border pulsations, and the suprasternal pulsations that we look at while we are doing the inspection and the palpation. Please remember, the apical impulse is generated from the ventricles. The parasternal lift or heave is generated from the right ventricle. So parasternal heave will show the status of the right ventricle. The apical impulse will show the status of the ventricles. The left upper sternal border pulsations will be coming from the pulmonary artery, and the suprasternal pulsations will be coming from the aorta. So with that background, let's see how it will help. If the apex is hyperkinetic, that means it is volume overloaded. That means it is forceful, it lifts your finger, but it does not sustain the lift of your finger. While you are trying to look for the apical impulse, then you are looking at supposing this impulse is sustained, that means the apex is pressure overloaded or the ventricle is pressure overloaded. In the first phase, when we said hyperkinetic, we meant that the apex was volume overloaded. When we say it is sustained, that means it's lifting your finger for more than 2/3 of systole. It's pressure overloaded. And the things that we consider then are a congenital aortic stenosis, right? So if it's sustained, we are looking at a congenital aortic stenosis. If it's hyperkinetic, we are looking at a VSD or a PDA. Now, whether it is localized or it is diffuse, again, localized money, it is confined to an area of 3 centimeter, a circle with a radius of 3 centimeter, with a diameter of 3 centimeters, or we also say if it is localized to one intercostal space, then we say it is localized. And a localized apex in clinical medicine is coming from a left ventricle. So that means if the ventricle or if the apex impulse is formed by the left ventricle, it will be localized. If it is coming from the right ventricle, it is diffuse. That means it spreads out in an area of more than 3 centimeter diameter circle. So if it is diffuse, that means there is increased right ventricular pressure or there is pulmonary stenosis. If it is tapping, that is a normal apex, which is tapping. Tapping may be seen in mitral stenosis, as we all know, but we're not talking about mitral stenosis here. We're talking about congenital heart diseases. And if you find a tapping apex, then you think of an ASD. So a hyperkinetic apex, you are talking about VSD and PDA. If you're having a tapping apex, you're talking of a ASD. Tapping apex will not lift your finger. It will just touch and go. A hyperkinetic or a volume overloaded apex will lift your finger, but the lift will be for less than 1/3 of the systole. Whereas a sustained apex will be pressure overloaded and it will lift your finger for more than 2/3 of the systole. So let me put this again and let me repeat this. So a normal apex, there are only two kinds of apex. Let's begin there. So there are only two kinds of apex. A normal apex is tapping. If it is tapping apex, then it could be just touching your finger and going back without lifting it. That's a normal or a tapping apex seen in ASD. The second kind of apex would be a forceful apex. A forceful apex would lift your finger. If the lift of the finger is less than 1/3 of the systole, then we say it is a hyperkinetic or an ill-sustained apex. So forceful and ill-sustained. If it is forceful, it can be well-sustained. If it is a forceful, well-sustained apex, that means it is a pressure overloaded condition and it could be a congenital AS. If it is forceful and ill-sustained, then that's what you are looking at in cases of a VSD and PDA. So I hope I have tried to make myself much clearer. Tapping apex or forceful apex, localized apex or diffuse apex. Two things that you look at in the apex when you're examining it. Next, coming to the volume overloaded conditions, which will cause a parasternal heave. As we said in one of the previous slides, the parasternal heave is a reflection, sorry, we've gone back much more. So yes, in this slide, we said apical impulse generated from the ventricles. Parasternal lift is a feature or a function of the RV. LU, left upper sternal border pulsations, are a feature of pulmonary artery, and suprasternal pulsations are reflections of the aorta. Coming back, the left parasternal lift or the parasternal heave occurs in volume overloaded conditions, can be seen in ASD, can be seen in pulmonary stenosis, and can be seen if there is a pulmonary hypertension. Third thing, you're looking at left upper sternal border pulsations. And if the pulsation in this area, in the second left interspace, if you are finding a palpable P2, then that is called a diastolic shock. If there is a palpable pulmonary artery plus a P2, then it's pulmonary hypertension. If it's palpable pulmonary artery only, then it's a left to right shunt. If there is a systolic thrill without a pulmonary artery or a P2, then you're looking at a pulmonic stenosis. But as far as I want you to remember, forget this slide. This one you should remember. Parasternal lift is a reflection of the right ventricle and is seen in ASD. And apex, definitely I would like you to remember, whether it is tapping or it is forceful, whether it is localized or it is diffuse. Coming back, so putting now inspection and palpation together, there are two important questions which you should have answered by this time. You should be aware which chamber is enlarged. Is it the right ventricle or is it the left ventricle? The answer would have come from the nature of the apex, whether it was diffuse or localized. If it was diffuse, it was the right ventricle. If it was localized, it was the left ventricle. You should have also been able to understand at this point of time, is the pulmonary blood flow increased or not increased? If it is increased, it will be evidenced by a parasternal lift and a palpable P2. Are there any murmurs palpable? You would have also understood by this time if there is a thrill when you have put your hand on the precordial region. So after you have got this information, now remember, if it's a tapping apex, it's ASD. If pulmonary hypertension has developed, then the apex may become diffuse and the parasternal heave may appear, and you may have pulmonary artery palpable with a P2, which is palpable. But if none of these complications have occurred, then the apex is just tapping and it's a congenital heart disease, then you're looking at an ASD, which is simple. VSD, you have a localized hyperkinetic apex with a left parasternal heave. You have a systolic thrill, which is felt at the left lower sternal border. But if pulmonary hypertension develops, then you will have a palpable P2. In PDA, the apex would be down and out. You would have a hyperkinetic apex. Again, it will be forceful, ill-sustained. That is equal to hyperkinetic. So it's the same, we have so many terms, but it is the same thing. It is forceful, ill-sustained is also equal to saying that the apex is hyperkinetic. If you have a continuous thrill at the lower left upper sternal border, and you have a P2 palpable, you have some suprasternal pulsations, then these are the features of PDA. Again, so that's it. And tetralogy of Fallot is usually a normal and unimpressive apex. It's hardly a tapping apex. No pulsations are seen in the pulmonary artery area. So when you are examining a patient of tetralogy of Fallot, you realize that there is not much examination findings that you are getting, but the patient would be cyanosed and the patient would be dyspneic. But when you examine the heart, there are really not many physical findings that you will find. So again, coming back to a broad categorizations, if you are having ASD, VSD or PDA, then you would have a cardiomegaly, you would have a left parasternal impulse, a palpable pulmonary artery, a palpable and loud P2, the patient would be in congestive heart failure, and there would be flow murmurs across the aortic valve that you would have, to the AV valves that you would be able to appreciate. If these are the other diseases which are classified below the line in the second group, in the broad categorizations, you would find if it's a tetralogy of Fallot or it's a coarctation or a congenital aortic stenosis or a congenital PS, you will find that there is no cardiomegaly, there is usually no congestive heart failure, there is no AV flow murmur, and you would find a faint or an absent P2. That means it's a very unremarkable and a very unglamorous physical examination findings that you will find in this category of diseases, whereas the findings would be much more in the above category. So at the end of palpation, you would know whether the patient is cyanotic or acyanotic. If he is acyanotic and has cardiomegaly, has got a heave or a left sternal border lift and a palpable P2, then you are looking at an ASD or a PDA. However, if there is no cardiomegaly, left sternal border lift is not there, and palpable P2 is not appreciable, and it's an acyanotic heart disease, then you start thinking of aortic stenosis or a coarctation of aorta. A VSD and PS could fit in either way, and depending upon the clinical stage, but that's how you would approach them. Supposing it's a cyanotic heart disease and you don't find a cardiomegaly, you don't find a lift, you don't find a palpable P2, then you are thinking of a tetralogy of Fallot. But supposing you do find all these things, then you are looking at either an Epstein's anomaly, a TGA, TA. Now, I'm not covering those in this particular lecture, but I just wanted to give you an idea, and you would get to see them in the future lecture, probably in the second part of the congenital heart disease. So with this, I complete the inspection and palpation part, and then we would go on to the auscultation. So again, as usual, I would take a break here, and I would invite anything if Sonal has to say at this point of time.
No, I found my presentation showing the femoral pulse. Let me see if I can share it. I'm not sure if I can share it. Can I share my screen?
Let me see if I can do that. I don't know, even I am learning with this. So try if your screen works. You can, but I can't see it.
No, I haven't been able to yet. Yeah, I don't think I can. I'll just send it to you, like 2 slides, and maybe once we are done with everything, you can pull it up later.
Yep, I think, yes, if I make you presenter, okay. Yes, now you can share your screen, I think.
Yeah, now I think I can. You see my screen now?
Yes, I can, and I hope everybody else can. Let me take an opinion from at least one person. So, are you able to see the new screen, Swati?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is visible.
So basically, what this is showing is, oh, come on, sorry. Basically, what this is showing is, let's say you have a catheter in the aorta, right? So when there is during systole, when the left ventricle contracts, you have blood flow which is going in the aorta, and then your aortic valve closes, and eventually, you know, the pressure in the aorta starts coming down until the next beat. Now, the way this is transmitted to the distal part, that is to say, the farther you go away from aorta, once the pulse goes, it's going through the artery, then to the
Swati,
arteriole.
have we lost Sonal, or is it me who's not connected?
No, sir. I'm here.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So yeah, so when the pulse goes, once the heart contracts, the pulse goes and it is hitting the arteries, right? So the pulse is propagating through the arteries into the arterioles and the capillaries. Now it's like a sound wave. So once there is a sound wave like that's coming from a bell, it goes and hits and resonates, right? Similarly, once the pulse is hitting these arteries, like the walls of the arteries and the arterioles, there is a reflection of the pulse back, right? So the farther you go away from the arteries, the more the reflection is, just because of the resistance. So if you're going, let's say, from the aorta all the way to the femoral artery, there is stacking, because so one, there is force which is coming from the outflow, like output of the LV, and secondly, there is a back wave which is coming as a reflection from what is happening in the arteries, and the two stack and gives you higher pulses. Like you will see this curve, it is higher once you're in the femoral artery as compared to when you're closer to the aorta. So that is why in aortic regurgitation 1, you already have increased blood flow, and then once increased blood flow is hitting the femoral arteries and distal arteries, you're having a greater back wave which is coming, and you're seeing a bigger systolic blood pressure in femoral arteries as compared to arteries that will be closer to the aorta. Did that help at all, or did I confuse
Yes,
you
ma'am.
more?
No, ma'am. It's clear.
So basically, forward flow from the LV, and then there is a back wave which is coming after it's being reflected from the peripheral arterioles, and that is stronger when you are distal, and that is why you have more backflow and more stacking, so as to say, and increased systolic pressure.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, ma'am.
Did we lose Ashish sir? Are you still there? No, yeah, now made you the presenter back. Are you still there?
So again, I think my connection had gone, and that's the problem with technology. Did we resolve that, Sonal?
Yeah, I think we did. I mean, we talked about the propagation of pulse and the backflow coming from the peripheral resistance. So I think we resolved them. You can just unmute
Yes,
them.
sir.
Yes. Swati is there. Cool. So I will just go on to the auscultation part, or do we get more comments on the inspection palpation part from the others? Let's see. Let's try some. Akash, I'm going to unmute you if you want to add some comments here and try. Anukriti Kaushik, I'm trying to unmute you.
Yes, sir.
Ashish, sir. Yep. So would you like to add something, or are you still with us, or are you able to comprehend what we have been saying so far?
Yes, sir. So, matlab, I couldn't get the last part that ma'am told. Ki in aortic regurgitation, there is pressure summation in the distal arteries more. Like in lower limb arteries, there is more. They are more distal, so the pressure summation will be more, and they'll have greater pulsation, and therefore they'll have systolic BP more. But doesn't why does that occur only in aortic regurgitation and not like normally also that should occur if that's the case कि आर्टरीज अगर फार्दर हैं तो उनमें ही ज्यादा पल्सेशन जा रही है तो aortic regurgitation के अलावा नॉर्मली भी यही काम होना चाहिए
So not
So normally यही काम होता है. That's why the Hill sign, can we say, so normal 20 millimeters mercury का variation तो होता ही है. But this is an exaggeration of that, and that's when it becomes excessive, because that's when we find it. Yes, Sonal, you were saying something.
same thing that normally भी यही होता है that if you measure pressures in the lower limbs, they are higher than pressures in the upper limbs, and that difference is normally 20. But when you have exaggerated volume, which is hitting, because ultimately you're pumping out more through the LV, because whenever the heart contracts in systole, you have more blood flow coming back to the LV. Eventually, LV में इतना volume हो जाएगा that you're pumping more volume forward, and that more volume forward will generate more back pressure. So what you see is an exaggeration. So you're right, normally भी होता है, but it's 20. But in aortic regurgitation, because of increased forward volume, you have increased. It's like, everything has an equal and opposite reaction. It's like more you're pumping forward, the more you're getting back pressure, and hence that's exaggerated.
okay ma'am thank you
Cool,
I
thank you.
got it.
Mehul, are you there? Mehul Taggar? I have unmuted you if you want to speak something. Oh, Bhupin, you are here. Bhupin, if you want to say something. I'm glad, Bhupin, that you're still around. Actually.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, sir.
So are you still with us? So far,
Yes,
so
sir,
good.
yes, sir.
पक्का? Everything clear?
Yes.
मैं फिर जब एग्जाम लूंगा ना तो तुमसे पक्का पूछूंगा भूपिन. तो everything clear अभी बोल के फायदा नहीं है. Sure?
Yes, sir. Doing good.
Cool. Thanks. So let's go on to auscultation. Okay. So let's proceed with auscultation. So when we are auscultating, it's the second heart sound which will give us the most information, the S2, when we are looking at a case of congenital heart disease. So a split and intensity are the only two things that we need to look at when we are looking at the second heart sound. So most of this will sound like theory, but yes, if you understand this theory, then you would be able to identify more at the patient's bedside, because the eyes see what the mind knows. split indicates that there is an RV. It indicates what's the magnitude or what's the proportion of the RV and the LV flow. So right ventricle में कितना blood जा रहा है और left ventricle में कितना blood जा रहा है. That will give us the split will help us to interpret that difference. So generally there is a normal split which is variable with respiration. When I say that, what does it mean? बहुत ज़्यादा bedside पर पता नहीं चलता है, but what you will definitely be able to hear is that the split will be audible in one of the phases only, in inspiration or expiration. जब सिर्फ एक फेज में सुन रही है और दूसरी फेज में नहीं सुन रही है, so that is a normal thing usually. But अगर आपको दोनों phases में बराबर split सुन रहा है of P2, then we say it's a wide split P2. It's important to determine whether it's a single sound or two sounds. If it's two sounds, is it widely split or it's a reverse split? So more of theory. It's the so what I want to say in this slide is basically that the split will tell you about the amount of flow, and the intensity will tell you about the pressure in the heart or pressure of blood in the chambers. If P2 is loud or A2 is loud, that means the pressure is increased. Whereas if it's split, then it will tell you the amount of flow that is there. So this is the depiction of a wide split S2. That means the split is more than 0.05 seconds, and it is seen in atrial septal defect, moderate PS, when there is a pulmonary hypertension, or an RPBB. But we were talking about ASD, VSD, and PDA. So if you find that the split is wide and fixed, then it's an ASD. And that's more or less what I had to say. If it's a single S2, if you're looking at a congenital heart disease and you're not able to appreciate the split and you are only hearing one S2 and you're not able to identify any split in either phase of respiration, then that can happen in either AS or severe stenosis with PS, or a single semilunar valve like tricuspid atresia, or a transposition of great arteries. Forget it. What you do need to remember is that when it's a wide split S2, you are thinking of an aortic atrial septal defect. Or if you're looking at ASD, then you should specifically be trying to identify or hear the wide split S2. Let's forget about the reverse splitting and single S2 here for this point of time. Now let's talk about a loud P2. Again, this is not probably important, or it's not relevant for an undergraduate student. But if you're doing very well and you're looking at things, I just put this here for completion. This will give you an idea of how much is the systolic pressure or the pulmonary artery pressure in the systole, depending upon the loudness of P2, how loud the P2 is. The loudness of P2 is always compared to A2. If it's so how it's usual, and what are the different variations and gradations is here in this. But for the understanding part, I don't want you to remember this at this point of time. So in commonest cyanotic heart diseases, you would have a single S2, and if it's a cyanotic heart disease and you hear an S2 split, then you really need to consider whether it's actually a cyanotic heart disease, or if the patient is really cyanosed, or is he having methemoglobinemia, and you really need to listen to S2 again. So in a cyanotic heart disease, please don't talk about a split S2 and just say that you have a single S2 if you are presenting a case of a cyanotic heart disease in the exam, or if you're looking at a case of cyanotic heart disease at a UG level. If you're doing so well, and if you're asked what are the causes of a split S2 in a cyanotic heart disease, then remember this slide, otherwise forget it. Coming to murmurs, if you are hearing a systolic murmur, so if you're hearing a murmur in systole in the right upper sternal border, So this is marked in red in this figure. So if you are hearing this murmur, systolic murmur in this red area, then you think of aortic stenosis or a bicuspid valve. So this is the area where you need to think of. So if you're listening to a systolic murmur in this particular area, it's an aortic stenosis or a bicuspid valve. If you are listening to this murmur in this particular area in the left upper sternal border, then you are considering a PS, a pulmonary stenosis, a VSD, or a PDA. If you are hearing a systolic murmur in the left lower sternal border, that is marked in yellow here, then you are probably considering a case of VSD, a tricuspid regurgitation, a subaortic stenosis, or an infundibular PS. Forget it, it's only VSD. You should be listening to the murmur which is systolic and in this area. If you are hearing a systolic murmur at the apex, it indicates in white in this diagram, then you are looking for a mitral regurgitation or a tricuspid regurgitation. That's as far as systolic murmurs are concerned. And if you're hearing diastolic murmurs in these particular areas, then this is the interpretation of these. But since our focus for this class is basically ASD, VSD, and PDA, I'm stopping at this point. And if it's ASD, you would, if it's a VSD or a PDA, you would rather or largely hear murmur in the left upper sternal border, which is depicted in green in this diagram on the left side. Leaving with diastolic and continuous murmurs. Of course, the PDA has often, and it's the most easy murmur to pick up and the most difficult murmur to miss. So you can't miss a murmur of PDA, because as soon as you put your stetho on the heart, in a large area or in most of the precaudal area, you will hear a machinery murmur which is continuous. And if you hear a continuous machinery murmur in this area which is green, you are thinking of a PDA. Whereas if you are looking at a continuous murmur which is occurring in this blue area, you're looking at an aortopulmonary window. If you're finding a continuous murmur in the right sternal border, then you're looking for a mitral stenosis with ASD. And if you're looking at the lower sternal border and you're finding a continuous murmur there, then you need to think of a coronary AV fistula. But please remember the green portion. If you're finding a murmur in this area, which is continuous, which is like a machinery murmur, then you are thinking of a PDA. So that's it. That's the end of my class today. It was 2 hours, and the key points to remember are: classify cyanotic with acyanotic, identify coarctation based upon the lower blood pressure in the lower limbs, and differential cyanosis, where you find parome, it's more cyanosis and the blood pressure is lower, and you can indicate the degree of the pulmonary blood flow based on the X-ray findings and on the basis of P2, and you have a clinical guide to severity. So that's about what I had to say